Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Last time we were talking about schizophrenia. One of the things that I said was that schizophrenia has been found on the same gene or the same gene sequencing as depression, ADHD. Well, let me go from least worst to the worst. From ADHD, it's on the same gene with ADHD, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and autism. Autism, of course, is the worst because autism is, with autism, the individual loses much of their social functioning. Schizophrenia, of course, the individual has social capabilities, but because of disorganized thought pattern, they cannot function in society. Somebody with autism, of course, they can be trained. That doesn't sound like the right word, but the reality is they have to be conditioned to be able to function in society. We're going to talk about autism spectrum disorder. Autism spectrum disorder is a fairly broad problem. It goes all the way from barely non-functional in society to completely non-functional in society. Autism is a lifelong developmental disorder. It's characterized by impaired social interaction, impaired languages, narrow range of interest and activities. They may perseverate, which is kind of interesting. Means they do the same thing over and over again. Persevere. Perseverate comes from the word persevere. They may nod their head. They may have ritualized finger movements. They may rock back and forth. And of course, the question is, why in the world do they do these ritualized behaviors? And the answer is because they're trying to control their environment. So the individual, especially if a stressful situation comes up, the individual will start performing these ritualized behaviors, especially the rocking back and forth. If something that they don't understand is happening, you've got a bee, I guess. He's probably in here because there's so much smoke outside. Smoke confuses bees. He'll probably be okay. Are you suffering from the smoke too?
I think so.
Okay. Marius is having problems. So these individuals will perform some of these ritualized behaviors, and usually they have a set group of ritualized behaviors. Sometimes it involves them striking themselves or rocking back and forth. Banging their heads is a ritualized behavior. Some individuals, when they get very agitated, will do. They have difficulty judging other people's thoughts and feelings because they don't look in people's faces. They can't read faces like everybody else can. It's one of the first things that we learn because we are making such strong eye contact with our caregivers. We learn facial expressions, and of course that's part of growing up. Little girls are a little bit better at it than little boys are, as it turns out. Why? Because mothers tend to spend more time with little girls. They make more facial expressions to little girls than little boys. And for that reason, little boys have a more difficult time reading facial expressions than little girls do. Autism is like I said, it's on the same gene with schizophrenia, depression, and ADHD, and bipolar disorder. It has a strong heritability. It occurs in 1 to 2 children per 1,000, and of course, we have recently expanded the whole concept of autism spectrum disorder to include people with Asperger's, what we used to refer to as Asperger's syndrome, which is really low-level autism. And since we've done that, the number of people with autism has expanded markedly. And some people say it's 1 out of every 50 or 60 people, and they are predicting that that's going to happen in the future. But a lot of this has to do with the fact that we keep changing the definition of what autism is. We also are better at diagnosing autism. It's far more common in males than it is in females, unfortunately for males. As we will find out with almost all the mental illnesses, males suffer from almost all the mental illnesses more frequently than females, except for depression. Depression is more prevalent in females. And there's another mental illness that females suffer from more than males, and that is Rett syndrome. They may have rolled Rett syndrome into autism spectrum disorder. I'm not exactly sure. I've been teaching abnormal psychology for 30 years, and they keep changing all the criteria. So Rett syndrome may not exist anymore. It's a possibility that they rolled it into autism spectrum disorder. Study by Rodier in 2000 demonstrated a common abnormal allele on the Hox gene in the 7th chromosome. Reduced size, these individuals tend to have a reduced size of corpus callosum. As you're going to see, it's not nearly as bad as some other afflictions, such as fetal alcohol syndrome. The corpus callosum is almost non-existent, but I'm going to show you a picture in just a second. It's not nearly as small as people with FAS. Reduced size in select cerebellar regions, and that has to do with movement, of course. And there you see two corpus callosum. The one on top is a little bit smaller than the one on the bottom. While periods of unhappiness affect everyone from time to time, prolonged chronic depression occurs most often in people over 40, and women 2 to 3 times more frequently than men. There's a reason for all of these things. People over 40, your brain chemistry starts to change. Your hormonal structure starts to change at about your late 30s, early 40s. So we see a lot more depression in people over 40. Testosterone starts reducing after 30. And of course, testosterone is one of the hormones that men use to fight depression. Women a lot more than men because they have hormonal changes. Their hormonal changes are much more prevalent than males. Okay. Anyway. Depression is not sadness, but it is characterized by being unhappy, or unhappy moods, loss of interest, energy, and appetite, difficulty in concentration, restless agitation. Depression may not be triggered by any apparent stress. If we are going to diagnose somebody with depression, if they've been under a lot of stress lately, we will probably not diagnose them with depression. We'll probably diagnose them with situational unhappiness or something. Without treatment, it may last for months. Normally what we try to do is raise your serotonin level, or we try to raise your norepinephrine level, or both. Usually it's the serotonin level that we try first. At any one time, about between 13 and 20% of the population may be depressed. Something happened yesterday. Oh, there was a shooting in Northern California where the guy killed his wife, and then he stole a truck and started driving down the road shooting people. He killed 3 people, other than, of course, he killed his wife. Here this guy's driving up and down the road in a pickup truck, blasting away at people. He had 4 weapons in his vehicle. One was a military AR-15. Once again, it's an AR-15. He had 3 pistols in the back of it, in the seat beside him. He ran through a locked gate at an elementary school and started shooting inside the classrooms. I know. This is pretty gross and horrible. Was he depressed? Well, he's dead, so we really don't know. But you know, these kinds of things can really affect people. People are sensitive to these kinds of things. So maybe the depression. We've had these horrible shootings lately. Of course, this guy could have done a lot of damage at the grade school. An individual saw what he was doing, shooting out all the windows in the grade school, in the elementary school. So he went, you know, hey, how about chasing me? You know, that one, those kinds of things. Of course, the guy, you know, pulled off around. He winged it. He didn't knock him down, and then he started chasing him. The cops caught him about that time and killed him. I know. Does that sound depressing? I don't know why people are so depressed lately. I don't know why people are blasting away at other individuals lately. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But maybe we'll figure it out. Bipolar disorder is diagnosed when someone who suffers from depression also displays episodes of excessively expansive moods, which include sustained overactivity, talkativeness. It's almost like they're on speed. It's manic behavior, and actually that's how we describe people that are on methamphetamines and speed. It looks like they're having a manic episode. They have increased energy and strange grandiosity. I'm going to try to show you a couple videos. This is a guy that suffers from bipolar disorder. I tried earlier and it didn't work, so let me see if it works this time.
Hey, what's up, my people? Hey, I feel great today, but the problem is, and I'm not going to lie to you, I feel a little too great. In fact, I'm feeling manic. First of all, I've made no changes in the medications that I've been taking, and you remember just a few days ago I was depressed. Now I feel great. I'm the king of fucking YouTube, baby. And, you know,
sorry.
Feeling manic like this can be good. It feels great right now. I'm king of the world, bitches. But straight up, I do love you. I love my people. I've developed an awesome community that's real, that's hopefully as real as me. And I love you guys so much. Sincerely, you fucking know it. But one of the symptoms, one of the many symptoms of the manic phase is having racing thoughts, and not really being focused still, but having racing thoughts and talking a little too fast and having delusions of grandeur. But I'm not having delusions of grandeur. I'm really the great boondoggle. I mean, come on, bitches. I'm fucking famous and you know it. Oh God, I can barely keep my thoughts in my head.
Okay, do you get the picture? Okay, same guy. If this one works.
Today is one of my hardest vlogs I've had to make because I have to make a vlog every day. I'm very depressed today. And not because anything about Papa. My aunt is still waiting for the results, which I am still optimistic about. I'm not depressed over any idiots on YouTube. I'm bipolar, which means that the chemicals in my brain don't always function. And even with a whole host of medications,
Your nose is running. Oh, jeez.
To prevent me from the depths of sadness we're at right now. You know? As a bipolar person, I do believe I'm probably more manic and more positive, and I certainly portray that side a lot more on YouTube. Who wants to see this? Depressed, fat guy, without a shirt. Okay, I'm tired of the absolutely not there though. Look what they have me on. Tegretol, 400 milligrams in the morning, 600 milligrams in the evening. They have me on Seroquel, 100 milligrams in the afternoon. They have me on Trazodone, 50 milligrams in the afternoon. They have me on Zyprexa, which comes in its own fancy bottle. It's disgusting. This is a medication for bipolar disorder, and it's packaged in a style. It's evil. 2.5 milligrams a morning, 5 milligrams a night. And they have me on hydroxyzine. That's what
Hydroxyzine.
hydroxyzine.
There you go, hydroxyzine.
2.5 milligrams.
Yeah,
3
right.
times a day. Notice none of these are benzodiazepines.
Okay, yeah, none of them are benzodiazepines. Blood? Fly? Yeah, bee. Are you allergic to bees?
No, I just
He's all confused because of the smoke. Kind of interesting. One of the ways that we treat individuals, in the old days we used to treat people with bipolar disorder with lithium carbonate, but we don't do that as much anymore because lithium is a poison. So we were killing people. Now we treat them with anticonvulsants. If you remember, one of the drugs that he was talking about was Tegretol. Tegretol is an anticonvulsant. It's what we give people with epilepsy. If we mix 2 anticonvulsants together, if we give them, well, in his case, he's taking, what was his other, carbamazepine. He was taking carbamazepine and Tegretol. Those are both anticonvulsants. And it works. It works for people with bipolar disorder for some reason. So that's normally what we are doing at this stage. We're giving them anticonvulsants, as odd as that sounds. He was also on trazodone. Trazodone is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, but it specifically decreases the amount of delta wave sleep that individuals go into. One of the things that we were doing after Vietnam, we were treating individuals with PTSD with trazodone. And the reason we were doing that was because they were having recurring dreams of their incidences of war. And in order to decrease the amount of dreaming that they were doing, we gave them trazodone, and it made them skip right over the delta wave sleep right into REM sleep. Of course, it caused other problems. But he's on trazodone, trying to keep him out of REM sleep. Hello? No, you had the wrong number. None of you guys are Lori, are you? No. Is Lori there? Okay. Depression. Depression may lead to suicide. Estimates are that 80% of the people who commit suicide are profoundly depressed. While suicide rates overall are decreasing in the Western Hemisphere, disturbing indications are that suicide in the younger population is increasing. Any reasons why younger people are committing suicide at higher rates now than ever before? What's going on? Depression is less prevalent in the Western world, but all of a sudden the kids are more depressed. Is anything going on that would make the kids depressed? They hate politics. Trump's making them jump off of buildings. Is that what's happening? Could it have something to do with the fact that you're on your electronic things all the time and you're not making face-to-face contact with people? Could that be part of it? You're playing video games and you're not interacting with other individuals? Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. But I'm sure that nobody's going to talk about it, because that means that you're going to stop buying your $1,000 iPhones. Isn't that how much an iPhone is now? Yeah, $1,000. Yeah. So, and they want you to keep buying Apple products. It's not just Apple, of course, it's everybody, it's anything, it's the computers. I mean, you have to have a new computer every 2 or 3 years so that you can continue to play your video games. This may have something to do with it, we're not exactly sure. And even if it is, of course, even if a psychologist came out and said that people aren't interacting as much with each other and we need to reduce the amount of technological time that people are spending on these devices, that he'd be sued by Apple, he'd be sued by Sony, he'd be sued by Hello Moto, whatever, Motorola. Yeah, that's one of my favorite commercials, the lady with the green lipstick saying hello Moto.
Yes, a long time ago.
I know, well, anyway, so we're not exactly sure what's going on. Looking at concordant studies, the incidence of depression is much higher among dizygotic and monozygotic twins. Concordant studies of monozygotic twins raised apart shows equally similar results. So evidently there is a genetic aspect to it. As I was saying before, depression is on the same gene as schizophrenia, autism, ADHD, and bipolar disorder. So they're all on the same gene. So it is heritable. We know that depression is heritable. You probably know of families where the mother's unhappy and the daughters now suddenly are unhappy, just like the mother is. I mean, it's almost like everybody in the family is the same way. The boys, not so much. Why would the boys not be unhappy? Why aren't they depressed like Sister Sally and Genevieve, and Mom? Why aren't the boys as unhappy as the girls are? Boys have a way of dealing with depression. So how do boys deal with depression?
Exercise.
Activity, exactly. Yeah, they raise their testosterone level. Since they have such a high testosterone level anyway, all they need to do is some activity. But the other thing that you're going to discover about those boys that aren't depressed, even though their sisters are depressed and their mother's depressed, what's going to happen is eventually these individuals are going to start getting in fights. Anger raises your testosterone level. So you'll see them get angry more frequently. Potentially you'll see them self-medicating with alcohol. So they may become drunks. And we're going to see that in just a second. Depression is common in select medical conditions, especially those that involve the endocrine system and brain disorders. Cushing syndrome is caused by lesions on the pituitary gland that cause an excess amount of ACTH and hence cortisol that's pumped throughout the system. The first symptom of Cushing's disease is depression. So one of the things that happens if you have an individual that's complaining about depression, you check their pituitary gland. You do an MRI to check to see if they have a lesion on their pituitary gland. I know that sounds kind of odd. The other thing that happens is their activity level just tanks. So these individuals become relatively obese. If it's a female, and most individuals with Cushing disease are females, they'll grow facial hair, which is always fascinating when you see it. They'll also start growing hair in odd places. They will start growing a pubic hair that's very similar to the male pattern of pubic hair. It's really kind of interesting. Of course, that's not something anybody ever talks about. We don't ask a woman, well, go ahead and drop your trowel so I can see your pubic hair. It's not usually something that a doctor will do. But you'll probably ask her if she has odd hair growth, and maybe she will mention that. But usually it's a facial hair that tells people what's going on. Parkinson's disease, about 50% of people who suffer from Parkinson's disease suffer from depression that can be attributed to no other symptom. Famous people that suddenly have Parkinson's disease Robin Williams was diagnosed with fast onset Alzheimer's disease, but it started out as Parkinsonian symptoms. His problem came from snorting cocaine. He had a cocaine problem earlier in his life. So he committed suicide. Why did he commit suicide? Well, depression. Two other individuals that have, usually people with Parkinson's disease, you don't see them, especially if they're celebrities, they kind of drop out of the limelight, and mainly it's because of the depression that they suffer from.
Didn't Michael J. Fox have Parkinson's?
Yeah, he's got Parkinson's, and actually he's been acting. He's had Parkinson's for about 15 years, but his Parkinson's was probably because of his cocaine habit. Another individual that snorted a lot of cocaine was Linda Ronstadt. Of course, you guys have never heard of this lady. She's a singer, but she's my generation, so she's my age. But she suffered from Parkinson's disease, and of course she's dropped off the face of the earth, mainly because of her depression. Of course, there are lots of different reasons why people develop Parkinson's. Before people were snorting cocaine, they were still developing Parkinson's. Now that people were snorting so much cocaine back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, these individuals, we were having more people with Parkinson's disease than we've ever had before. Why?
Celebrities with Parkinson's smoke cocaine once in their life? I mean, snort.
We know that's true. Linda Ronstadt used to brag about it. Michael J. Fox talked about his addictive personality. Who else was it? Oh, Robin Williams. We know that Robin Williams had a problem with cocaine. So these are three cases. A lot of people snorted cocaine back then. I didn't, of course. I'm not stupid like some people are. But then again, I was never a celebrity. I was also in the military, and one of my jobs was I was a narc. Was one of my jobs. I collected urine specimens on people that and checked them for drugs. Anyway, I saw how horrible these things could be. Anyway, okay, so Parkinson's disease. And if you hear of somebody else with Parkinson's disease, if you look at their history, and sometimes, it will be right there that they had a problem with snorting cocaine at one point, or they were arrested for cocaine possession or whatever. And you can determine what was going on. Now, potentially, they would have developed Parkinson's anyway. It usually kicks you into Parkinson's faster, which is the case with Michael J. Fox. He was in his early 30s, I think, when he developed Parkinson's disease. That's way too young for somebody. But remember, if you, as we know about schizophrenia, if you smoke pot or drop acid, then you're potentially going to get kicked into schizophrenia faster than if you didn't use any drugs, because it's a trigger. It's a trigger, and it's one of the things that will force them into developing their psychological symptoms faster. So Parkinson's disease is kind of the same situation. Linda Ronstadt snorted lots and lots of cocaine. She snorted so much cocaine that she had to have her nose reconstructed twice. What cocaine does is that it's a vasoconstrictor, so it will stop the circulation in whatever area that it touches. It will stop that circulation. So if you snort cocaine in your nostrils, what will happen is you're stopping the circulation of blood into the cartilage in your nose, and the cartilage dies. And once it dies, of course, then you get what they call a deviated septum. You get a hole between your two nostrils, and that has to be fixed. Well, what she did, she snorted so much cocaine, and her cartilage started dying that it started dropping away, and her nose slowly, the cartilage is what gives you the structure And it just slowly went away, and all of a sudden she had no cartilage in her nose, so they had to reconstruct it. And it happened to her twice, as stupid as that is. She didn't learn the first time, she did it a second time. And she would tell you today that she's completely clean, which is possible, but you know, the damage has already been done. And sometimes you can never go back. What are we doing? We've got Parkinson's disease. This may be due to lowered levels of serotonin from loss of neurons in the dorsal raphe nucleus, where large amounts of serotonin are stored. And of course, that may have something to do with why Parkinson's disease causes depression. Respirine, a drug that increases monoamine oxidase and thus depletes serotonin and norepinephrine, causes profound depression. So if we can increase the monoamine oxidase in your brain, then you will have depression. So one of the things that we do, one of the things we used to do in order to cure people's depression was we gave them a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So it decreased the amount of monoamine oxidase in their brains. Electroconvulsive therapy also reduces depression by reducing biogenic amines. And since it reduces biogenic amines, it reduces the amount of monoamine oxidase in your brain. So monoamine oxidase does cause depression, an excess amount of monoamine oxidase. I forgot my name. I must have left it downstairs. All around the world, more women than men suffer from depression at a rate of near 2 to 1. Several interesting studies show that rates may actually be closer to the same for men and women. Remember, men have a way of combating depression that women don't have. You can do all the exercising in the world, and it is going to make you less depressed than you were before. But if you're a male, of course, if you exercise, it's going to raise your testosterone level, and that, of course, is a good way of combating depression. So if a man gets depressed, one of the things he does is go work out or punch the wall. Anger will raise your testosterone level, so will exercise will raise your testosterone level. Several interesting studies that rates may actually be closer to the same for men and women. Study of depression rates among Amish shows that men and women have similar rates among the Amish. Is this a genetic thing? Well, no, it's not. What they figured is Amish men don't drink. And a lot of men, of course, will raise their, increase their dopamine level by drinking alcohol. And of course, there are more men that drink alcohol than women. So that's we can self-medicate, you know, and of course women can self-medicate and get just as snockered as men do, but they don't. So at this juncture, maybe as women start drinking more and men start drinking less, maybe they will even out, but right now that's not what's happening. Sleep studies of depressed patients shows that people suffering from depression spend much more time in stages 1 and 2 and much less time in more restful stages of 3 and 4. This means that depressed people jump into REM episodes much earlier than people with normal sleep patterns. And this is one of the things that we noticed with trazodone. Trazodone does work on people who are suffering from PTSD because we don't want them to have those horrible dreams. But the problem is they spend too much time in REM, and REM will cause you to be depressed. So that was what was happening with individuals suffering from PTSD. We were treating them with trazodone, and they were becoming more depressed. They weren't becoming depressed because of their war history. They were becoming depressed because of the medication that we were giving them, unfortunately. Studies show that the shorter the time that it takes to go into REM, the more severe the depression. And for this reason, people suffering from narcolepsy will seem depressed. One of the effects of antidepressant monoamine oxidase inhibitors is the fact that it reduces REM sleep, and that reduces the amount of depression that the individual is suffering from. Research by Anaveros and his colleagues found that 40% of the people they tested had abnormalities in their temporal lobes. Even in a resting state, these individuals have increased activity in the hippocampal area, an area known to induce fear when stimulated. So that's one of the things that is causing the panic attacks. The most common treatment for anxiety is the pharmaceutical benzodiazepine, such as diazepam. Diazepam, of course, is Valium. Benzodiazepines work because they change the permeability of the neural membranes to chloride ions, especially those that react to GABA. GABA, of course, is the substance that we're trying to increase with anxiolytics, and that's one of the reasons why the anxiolytics actually work, because they increase the GABA in your system. If we can increase your GABA, the anxiety and the fear will go away. The influx of chloride ions inhibits the firing of the neuron. Studies of individuals suffering from PTSD have shown that on the average, their right hippocampuses are 8% smaller than people without PTSD. And this is very similar to what happens with individuals suffering from schizophrenia. They're not putting information into their long-term memories anymore, and that's what's happening with individuals suffering from PTSD. They have these recurring thoughts, these recurring dreams, and because of that, they're not spending any time learning new material. So their hippocampi will become reduced in mass. High levels of circulating glucocorticoids from the chronic and intense stress of PTSD may have caused the cell loss in the hippocampus. So the more you think about the past, the more likely that your hippocampus is going to shrink. Research looking at OCD has found that sufferers have increased metabolic activity in the caudate nucleus, the left orbital gyrus, and the left anterior cingulate cortex, and bilateral orbital frontal cortex. Increased serotonin levels decreases OCD symptoms, especially the tricyclic clomipramine. Tricyclics are the oldest form of antidepressant that we have. Tricyclics were discovered. We started using tricyclics. We discovered that they're fairly toxic. So we were looking for something else. We found monoamine oxidase inhibitors. They're not nearly as toxic as tricyclics, but one of the things we discovered about monoamine oxidase inhibitors is that there are select substances you can't consume. One of the substances is anything fermented. Olives, you can't eat olives. You can't eat nuts. Because it causes an increase in your blood pressure, and it kills people if they eat. You can't eat beans if you're on monoamine oxidase inhibitors. So your diet, it restricts your diet, and most people don't like that. So now we, of course, have selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and we feel much, much better about it. Tourette's syndrome is a tic disorder. These individuals seem to be unable to stop themselves from moving. They have motor tics, they have vocal tics where they have to yell. All of a sudden they'll just yell. Or they'll swear like a sailor all of a sudden. It seems to be it's a tic. So it builds up in your system. And eventually, of course, it has to be reduced or you'll go. Well, it has to be reduced. And the way it's reduced is by you either moving in a certain way or saying something or doing something, ritualized behavior. And that's Tourette's syndrome. The average age of onset is 6 or 7. This does happen with adults. But normally, if you have Tourette's syndrome, it started when you were a child. These children may also have problems with ADHD, of course, and also OCD. We're not exactly sure why this occurs, but as you can see from OCD, there are lots of different areas of the brain that are affected. So any of these things can cause Tourette's syndrome as well. There's a single gene that may cause the problem. Concordance rates of monozygotic twins is 53 to 77%. Indications are that dopamine receptors, the D2 receptors, are more sensitive in these individuals, causing involuntary movements. Okay. This is mad cow's disease, bovine spongiform.
Mad cow disease. What is it? Scientifically named bovine spongiform encephalopathy, it is a progressive neurological disease that affects the cow's nervous system. Once infected, the cow's behavior becomes erratic. Inability to walk, uncontrolled movements, and lower milk production. Incubation period can be months, even years. There's no known treatment and the disease is fatal. How do cows get infected? A cow gets infected with the disease if they eat diseased feed, which has abnormal proteins called prions, found in brains, spinal cords, and other parts. These prions cause the degeneration in the brain, giving it a spongy-like appearance. How can it affect us? Humans don't get mad cow disease as such, but they get a variant of it if they eat the diseased cattle tissue. Health officials in the U.S. and elsewhere control such scenarios by periodic sampling and prohibiting cattle parts and feed, which may contain prions. Where has it been reported so far? Although the United Kingdom has been most impacted by the mad cow disease so far, the BSE has been reported in many countries around the world. Millions of cattle have been slaughtered, and nearly 200,000 cows have died. Around 200 humans have lost their lives. In the U.S. recently, a cow tested positive with the disease, but the health officials say that the infected cow wasn't designated for meat consumption, and it was an atypical strain of the disease.
Okay. That's mad cow's disease. Unfortunately, and it's caused by a prion. Prion is a mutated protein, and because of that, it, as you can see, this is what a normal brain looks like, and this is what a brain with mad cow's disease looks like. The prions. If a prion touches another protein, it mutates that protein. So what it does, it creates holes in the brain, and that's why they call it spongiform, because it looks like sponges inside. It's got all these holes, and it looks like it's a sponge. This is the way the brains normally look. This is what a prion. This is what a prion is, and it will take this protein, which is normally it's a solid structure that creates all of our cells. And it just pulls it apart. It lengths it, pulls it in a linear fashion. So rather than creating something that has form, all of a sudden it has no form at all, and then it creates empty areas in your brain, and people die from this stuff. As they said, 2,000 people died. That was a film from about 10 years ago. A video from about 10 years ago. It does cause, there is a similar disease in humans, and I can't think of the name right off the top of my head. The first name is Jacobs. I can't remember. Okay, and that's the end of chapter 16. However, I'm going to give you, the two of you, since you're here, the opportunity to take the quiz in here so that you don't have to take it online. How's that? Are you excited about that? No? Or you don't have to, you can do it online if you want. I will give you the opportunity to take the test. You get to decide whether the answer is correct between the two of you. Okay? You want to try it? If it doesn't work, we'll just let you do it online. The first question is epidemiological. You can look it up in your book if you want. It doesn't really matter to me. Epidemiological studies reveal that the incidence of schizophrenia among the world's population is blank, and this disease appears to have been present since the blank. A, 2 to 4% the Middle Ages. B, 1 to 2% the beginning of recorded history, 0.5% to 1% the Industrial Revolution, 4 to 6% beginning of the 20th century, and I'm recording this so everybody gets to hear what you guys have to say. Do you remember what I said about schizophrenia and how long it's been around?
I think it was from the 80s.
Middle Ages, 2 to 4%. You can discuss it amongst the two of you.
You can say,
I'm sorry?
oh, he's asking her, she thought it was
A, B, C, or D?
it's not the beginning of the 20th century.
So it's not D. The Industrial Revolution started about 1850. Just trying to help you.
D. It's between A and B.
You can look up the PowerPoint. I know this is exciting for the people in the audience. Oh my God, they're all screaming, the right answer, it's the right answer.
And I was like, oh my God, this is my God, I get it.
What's wrong with those two? They don't know how many of you were in the classroom. Any guesses?
Probably go
B?
Yeah.
Are you okay with B?
Yeah, I'm okay with
B is the correct answer. Good job.
Good job. Good guessing.
Good guessing. An example of a positive symptom would be blank. An example of a negative symptom would be blank. A, hallucination delusions. B, motor excitement hallucinations. C, hallucinations, emotional and social withdrawal. And D, blunted effect, motor excitement. A positive symptom and a negative symptom. Positive first, negative second.
C.
I'm sorry.
C.
C?
Hallucinations and emotions. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Okay. So that's your guess. That is correct. C is correct. MRI studies of identical twins who are discordant for schizophrenia, in other words, only one twin has the disease, have revealed that the affected twin often exhibits an enlarged A, amygdala, B, hippocampus, C, limbic system, D, lateral ventricles. What does a schizophrenic, somebody suffering from schizophrenia, what do they have that's bigger than normal? People suffering from schizophrenia have something that's bigger than everybody else's.
Lateral.
Lateral ventricles, do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, that's correct. They have bigger holes in their brains. The holes of their brains are bigger than everybody else's. In people with schizophrenia, cellular abnormalities are evident in several limbic system structures, including the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the parahippocampal gyrus. In these regions, A, the pyramid cells appear disorganized. B, the pyramidal cells are stacked in columns. C, the lateral ventricles are reduced. D, a reduced corpus callosum. So what is happening with people with schizophrenia as far as their cellular abnormalities are concerned? That was a great picture. I love pictures. They're worth 1,000 words.
My guess would be A.
The pyramidal cells appear disorganized. Do you agree?
Give me 5 seconds. More than 5 seconds.
Oh, I can't wait. That's
fine.
I just can't wait. I'm sorry.
So excited.
I'm so excited. Amphetamine abusers may take much larger doses. The use of very high doses may produce A, amphetamine psychosis, B, depressive delusions, C, reduced dopamine production, and D, bizarre movements. Amphetamine abusers, they take larger and larger doses. You were going to say something.
I was thinking it's either A or C.
A or C?
Or I'm thinking C. But I could be wrong.
You're not. Could be.
Could be.
A or C?
I think it could be A.
No. I'll go with her.
A is correct. Because amphetamine psychosis. I know, it's so weird.
I think I got that because the Pretty Little Liars. She was on amphetamines and she was like,
That's so cool.
Zippo? Chlorpromazine belongs to a class of antipsychotic drugs known as blank. Antipsychotics in general are known as neuroleptics. So, the 4 different types that we're talking about. Benzodiazepines, A, B, amines, C, phenothiazines, and D, clozapines. Chlorpromazine belongs to a class of antipsychotic drugs. Chlorpromazine. It was actually the first one. We don't use chlorpromazine anymore, we use thorazine. Chlorpromazine belongs to a class of antipsychotic drugs.
I'm trusting the judge. She's been right so far.
I would look it up.
I would look at him.
I wouldn't want to get it wrong. Good. Chlorpromazine. Any ideas? Phenothiazines?
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
Phenothiazines is correct. With drugs, usually the endings are the same, so you gotta be careful. If we're looking at tricyclics, they're amines. They're mipramine, dicypramine.
I think benzodiazepine is a depressant, isn't
Benzodiazepines is an anxiolytic, like diazepam. Diazepam is a benzodiazepine, so it's an anxiolytic. Patients with Parkinson's disease given L-DOPA secrete increased amounts of dopamine and may experience blank. Conversely, when people with schizophrenia are treated with dopamine antagonists, they may develop symptoms resembling blank. So if we give people with Parkinson's disease too much L-DOPA, how do they act? And if we give people with schizophrenia, if we decrease their dopamine level, what kind of symptoms do they have? It's one of the problems of trying to treat people. Sometimes you give them too much juice. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't read it. A, normal effects, Parkinson's disease. B, depressed symptoms, Tourette's syndrome. C, anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder. And D, psychotic side effects, Parkinson's disease. So we manipulate the dopamine levels too much. What kind of symptoms do they have?
Schizophrenia type. D? D, yeah, it's D.
D?
Yeah.
That is correct. Yeah. If you give somebody with Parkinson's too much L-DOPA, it makes them nuts, act like they've got schizophrenia. And if you give somebody with schizophrenia too much of the dopamine antagonist, they start acting like they've got Parkinson's. They get the whole tremor syndrome. Number 8, the long-term motor problem associated with the use of many antipsychotic drugs is called A, tardive dyskinesia, B, cerebral palsy, C, dementia praecox, or D, severe depression. This one you're going to have to look up because it wasn't in the lecture. So you're going to have to look it up in your text, I'm afraid. Long-term motor problem associated with the use of many antipsychotic drugs. Tardive dyskinesia, cerebral palsy, dementia praecox, severe depression. So, long-term motor problem. Any ideas? It's a motor problem. I'll give you one hint.
Cerebral palsy.
Dementia, of course, is a mental, it means you can't remember. And of course, depression, that's mental as well. So, yeah, that's a hint. So it's either A or B.
I'll go with B.
B, cerebral palsy?
Go with B.
Unfortunately, that's wrong. It's tardive dyskinesia.
Fine.
Cerebral palsy is a genetic
I
problem.
found a page.
Sorry about that. Unipolar major depression occurs most frequently in people blank, is most common in blank, and tends to last for months if untreated. At any given time, it is estimated that up to 20% of the population is suffering from depression.
C.
Okay, so A, under 20 males, B, over 60 women, C, over 40 women, D, geriatrics males. Males. So who suffers from depression the most? First of all, you have to decide whether it's boys or girls, then you have to decide how old they are.
It's girls.
It's girls?
Yeah, it's girls.
Okay.
C. It's C.
C, over 40. So why over 40? What happens at age 40?
Menopause.
Menopause, yeah. Well, menopause usually at the 50s, but your hormone level starts a bit more erratic. So that's, I mean, it's logic over 40. Number 10, in the 1930s, electroconvulsive shock therapy, in which electrodes deliver electricity through the skull to the brain, has been used unsuccessfully to treat schizophrenia, but it's been successful in treating, at first they started using it for schizophrenia, it didn't work. But it is successful at treating what? Mental illness. Severe anxiety, A, B, severe depression, C, the manic phase of bipolar disorder, D, the personality disorders. What does electroconvulsive therapy work on? ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. What mental illness does it work on? We know it doesn't work on schizophrenia. We still don't know why it works. We think it has to do with endorphins, but we can't prove it. ECT, what does it work on? No guesses?
Hold on.
What could be wrong with you that we shoot you up with electricity? We zap your brain with electricity.
Depression. Severe depression?
Severe depression, do you agree with that?
Yep.
That is correct. Severe depression. I know it works and we don't know why, but we think it has something to do with endorphins. People who attempt suicide tend to have low levels of blank or its metabolites in their CSF. A, GABA. People who commit suicide, what is their problem? GABA, serotonin, B, C, melatonin, D, glutamate. People who commit suicide. GABA, serotonin, melatonin, or glutamate. I'll give you one hint. Are you ready? Okay, then I won't give you a hint. Well, I'll give you the hint anyway. GABA and glutamate is a precursor for GABA, so it can't be that answer because it has that. Then there would be two right answers.
So there's no A.
I'm sorry.
A is not correct.
A is not correct, and D is not correct. A and D are not correct. That has to do with anxiety. And unless people are committing suicide because they are anxious, and that's not the right answer.
Yeah, B.
B,
Wait.
serotonin is correct. Yeah, they're depressed.
I think melatonin is the one that makes you sleepy.
Melatonin has to do with sleep. Yeah. One of the important biological effects of light is that it suppresses the hormone A, GABA, B, serotonin, C, melatonin, D, glutamate.
Melatonin.
Melatonin, do you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, melatonin is correct. In seasonal affective disorder, SAD, people tend to be depressed. A, in the spring with the rain. B, in the fall with the dust from the harvest. C, in the winter months. D, due to the bright sun of summer. When are people depressed?
C.
Seasonal affective disorder.
Seasonal affective. That's cool. I think you're gonna have a disorder. Seasonal affective disorder.
There you go. So when are you depressed?
Diagnosis
That's why people wear sunglasses.
Hmm.
Because
Must be
the
the
sun
sun.
makes them depressed. I'm just kidding.
Who did this?
That doesn't make any sense at all. The sun makes them depressed. Well, that's why people wander around at night, because daylight makes them so depressed.
You know, the rain makes my aunt depressed.
And then I'm saying C because of the holidays.
So when are people depressed? You guys shouldn't know anything about this because you live in Arizona. But in Montana, this is real. This is very real. And as you wander up into Canada, oh my God, they're even worse. The farther north you go, the worse it is. Is it the rain? Is it the dust from the harvest? Is it the sunlight, the bright sunlight? Or is it the yellow light of winter?
I think it's either B or C. Or I think
Seasonal affective disorder, when do you have it?
I'll go for C.
C?
Yeah.
C? C is correct. During the winter.
Yeah, those.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with, everybody loves the fall. That's when Halloween is, of course, and the pumpkins. Let me check that. Okay, we're doing okay. Bipolar illness is treated with the metal, this is what, lithium, okay. Lithium carbonate is the heavy metal that we used to poison people with. Anti-anxiety medications are known by the general name blank. Nowadays, the most prevalent case of anti-anxiety drugs consists of anxiophiles, SSRIs like Zoloft, anxiotics, MAOIs like Miltown, anxiolytics, benzodiazepines like diazepam, anxiotropics, tranquilizers like Valium. Anti-anxiety drugs, it's also known as what? And what is the common medication that we give for people with anxiety? I'm sorry, did you say? C? Anxiolytics, benzodiazepines like diazepam, that is correct. Okay. Number 16, the benzodiazepines interact with receptors for the transmitter blank, potentiating the ability of this transmitter to produce an inhibitory postsynaptic signal from the modulation of chloride conductance. These receptors are distributed widely throughout the brain, but they are especially dense in the cortex, the hippocampus, and which is especially implicated in fear. A, GABA and amygdala, B, glutamate and medulla oblongata, C, serotonin cingulate gyrus, and D, dopamine and putamen. What causes anxiety is the question. And where does our fear response come from? That is the question. A, GABA and amygdala, B, glutamate and medulla oblongata, C, serotonin cingulate gyrus, D, dopamine putamen. Where does our emotions come from? And what is the neurotransmitter that benzodiazepine works on?
A's okay.
I'm sorry?
I said A.
A is correct. Number 17, in PTSD, high circulating levels of blank may lead to cell loss in the blank and may contribute to the memory abnormalities. ACTH, corticosteroids, epinephrine, cortisol, and cell loss in what? In what area? What area do we lose cells? We know it's not A because ventricles are open areas.
D. Cortisol.
D, cortisol and hippocampus is correct. 8%, yeah, 8% loss. Okay, 18. And blank is an act that an individual performs over and over without reason or ability to stop, such as excessive hand washing, counting rituals, hoarding, or checking of kitchen appliances. And blank is a recurrent, unshakable thought that intrudes into consciousness over and over. Subjects include such concerns as fear of germs, lucky or unlucky numbers, orderliness, or fear that something terrible will happen. This has to do with OCD.
B.
B, obsessions and compulsions. That is correct.
Got scared.
Number 19, blank is particularly effective in treating OCD. An important aspect of this action is its ability to block the reuptake of blank. Some of the symptoms of OCD, such as a failure to suppress adrenocorticoids from dexamethasone administration have caused some researchers to argue that OCD may be related to depression. And,
C.
okay, so what are we treating OCD with? A, B, C, or D? Risperidone, dopamine, Xanax, GABA, Lexapro, serotonin, clomipramine, and serotonin.
D.
I'm sorry?
D.
D, clomipramine and serotonin. Clomipramine is a tricyclic. Serotonin is the right
C?
answer for, I'm sorry?
Would it be C?
It's either C or D. Lexapro actually is a serotonin superreuptake inhibitor. Either of those answers is actually probably pretty close to being correct. Lexapro is actually the right answer. The causative agent in mad cow disease, properly called bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or BSE, is an accumulation of abnormally folded proteins called blank. Humans contract the disease called blank when they eat beef from infected cows. So what is well, I'll tell you that in a second. So what are those things called? Those proteins, those mutated proteins. What is the answer to that? If you can figure out what the mutated proteins are, then the disease that I couldn't think of is the other one. What do they call the mutated proteins? If you remember, the proteins lacked structure. And caused-
C.
C, proteoids, proteoids.
Oh, no, it's D. No, I don't know. Wait.
Protons,
Oh, it's C.
Prions.
It's D. Sorry, D.
I'm sorry?
D.
D,
Bovine.
bovine encephaloporosis. That's not the human disease. Bovine means,
Oh, so that's
Bovine
the cow
means-
disease. So that's the cow disease. So it's C.
C is proteoids, human spongiform encephalopathy. Proteoids?
Yeah.
It's prions. And Creutzfeldt
prions.
Jakob disease.
Oh.
I'm going to give you that one because I couldn't think of the name before. So I'll see you guys next week on Tuesday, and then on Thursday, of course, we'll be eating turkey or whatever. If you're a turkey eater. Some people don't like turkey. I like turkey. I'll give you that one. So you both got a 19 out of 20. Okay. Which means that everybody gets a 19 out of 20 because everybody's going to watch this film. Get all the answers.